And it's such a pleasure to be here on this particular day, because this day is actually considered Vijaya Dasami. It's a particularly auspicious day in the Hindu calendar, where we have 9 days of kind of ritual for the feminine energy, the mother goddess. And the 10th day is a day of observance, where we do artistic things, we study, we do things that are knowledge based, and then we turn to the goddess for blessings. So it's really an auspicious day to be presenting for me this kind of a research in my new role. I just started as lecturer in creative arts and health a couple of days ago at Tasmania. I was in Hobart. I was down at Hobart, and it was lovely there. So I've just been kind of, yeah, it's been quite a change, and it's been a incredibly beautiful few days. But thank you for inviting me, and I do hope you can see my screen. Um, so leaning into songwriting, there was a reason I chose the word leaning, because sometimes kinship and friendship is developed by physical proximity, and um, the act of being in song with somebody is a sense of being together that is that has haptic qualities. It's very sensorially stimulating in ways that are still being described in the literature. So let's put it that way. There's so much literature on singing. There's so much literature on well-being to do with singing across contexts. So we look at clinical settings, we look at you know cancer wards, we look at perinatal contexts, such as the ones that I've worked in the past, or we look at non-clinical community-based work where well-being is seen more as, how can we feel good and amplify that being well, rather than focusing on what's not okay and fixing that. So both of these contexts, we see that singing is talked about a lot, and songwriting is particularly talked about in the work of wonderful scholars like Felicity Baker, whose work in songwriting has been iconic. And Felicity particularly inspires me because there's a lot of therapy in it, and she talks about group songwriting. She talks about songwriting that's driven by prompts, and there are so many ways in which scholars across the globe, especially in music therapy, have dealt with songwriting. Uh, on another level, there is community music and songwriting that comes in that rich tradition of being with people in a cultural setting, in a context of meaning making that is communal, that is driven sometimes by ritual, driven sometimes by social norms and rights. So we have things like social choirs, and that is more of a social singing context. And we see songwriting sometimes um, adopted in those settings. But across all of these settings, what runs really strong is the thread of culture and the participants' voices, and the important golden thread of creativity that kind of cements culture on the one hand, and then the participatory nature of the work on the other, driving it forward to an exercise not only that's people doing singing together, but people making meaning, memories, and moving towards a unison and kind of thought through song, or even finding ways to stay apart and be comfortable in staying apart. So just teasing out those things, and songwriting has been a lovely way to achieve that. But with that preamble, the word leaning came into my thinking because I was thinking of the sense of comfort that we sometimes get when we have a shoulder to lean on. And if we look at song as the bedrock of someone's childhood or existence, or something that connects them to land, their environment, their identity, their belonging, and makes them feel like they matter. And this was one of the phrases that one of the participants in my research used, like, I feel like I mattered. And it's very subtle things like that that kind of make an impression in the researchers' hearts, and get us thinking about words like comfort and um, and that care and gentleness, such as and words like leaning come into the text. So I've used it here, and I hope to use it in a publication real soon. But the idea is to find comfort, in having a shoulder to lean on, in having a place to repose, to rest, to enter a zone where contemplation is allowed, to sit things out. Sometimes we're so busy in life, it's really hard to unplug. So I think leaning into songwriting gives us an occasion to just unplug and sit certain difficult things out, because we can, and I think we could. So with that preamble, I'm just turning to the nature of song. A few aspects of song I did speak about with the earlier slide. But song means a lot of things to a lot of us. Um, we are in indigenous land, and we know the value of song for the First Nations people, um, that it connects them to their families, to the bloodlines, to their rituals and rites and cultures, and your and their land, and the kind of herbs they use, the kind of healing that they look to. All of this is closely aligned with song. Likewise, in India, where I'm from, we have a song for occasions. There's a song for childbirth and there's a song for marriage, as with many cultures. So, I mean, including, the global West, their song has occasioned many a situation in life that people remember and associate with memories. So there's also that strong emotional and affective association that songs can give. And inevitably, I mean, a song in its essence is a melding of melody on the one hand and text on the other, which makes it inherently interdisciplinary. And not only that, but there are two aspects here already, is music and language. But there's the story that a song explicitly can tell, and and what some cultural semioticians refer to as the paratext and the subtext, and all of those threads that run in the undercurrent of the explicit story, the backstories, the reason why the participants sometimes in research select certain words to tell their story, and the occasioning of those words, the provenance of certain phrases, turns of phrases, jokes that are typical to certain people and certain cultures. So, very specific backstories run strongly and undergird this visible story that a song can tell. And so, a song can have storied narratives that can be very meaningful to very many people in ways that others may not understand. So, it's quite individualistic, it can be crafted and it can be recrafted and retold just like a good story. And in this way, I turn to Clandinin sometimes and look at the narrative inquiry, um, I mean, the rich scholarship that underpins narrative inquiry, and wonder sometimes, that synergy between narration and song and storytelling in song, through song. And singing is embodied. I mean, so song inherently brings the body to the fore, and all of the cultural embeddedness that a body brings to it. So, and that brings me to the core of this presentation, which is culturally and linguistically diverse people, and how their voices can be brought to the fore through song, and how they can lean into song for the next point, which is genuinely expressing themselves. And so I was just having a conversation with someone, and who's a singer, and we were just saying, when you sing something, you really have to feel it. You can't sing something and not feel it. So if you say I am free, when you're saying it, I am free. Sometimes you're like, are you? Is that voice that inside you? Are you free? Or someone else's might ask you, but do you really feel that way? But when you sing, I am free, you really are flying. I mean, you really can't sing that with emotion or impact if you don't feel it, or if you don't at least feel a modicum of freedom, that cannot be articulated. I think some of the singers in the room are smiling. But yeah, so there's that genuinity of self expression that can come through beautifully in songwriting and in song. And when people verbalize it, when people put it in the paper, when those complex emotions come out in some way as song, they somehow get a life of their own. They become imbued with life. So it is infective in a way. It's like almost contagious, that emotion, and that speaks directly to some of the affect kind of studies that we see in psychology that singing and songwriting directly relate to. And therefore, because of all this, because it's situated in the body, because it is emotive, because it's a storytelling, and it deals with languages and melodies, it is inherently culturally situated and lends itself to people of different cultures coming in and threading those beads together, and is meaningful. And because of all of that, I have used songwriting a lot in my work. Uh, One of the projects that I worked on with songwriting was Sing to Connect, where I worked with culturally diverse and linguistically diverse mothers and midwives, and together we wrote songs. And some of the songs were emotional content. They were just talking about how they felt and whether they exercised that morning or what they ate, or simple things like that, but carry a lot of meaning in their context, when they're thinking about feeding the baby and nutrition and things like that. But there were also songs about immunization, the placenta, safe breastfeeding. So, really, health messages and how that can be amplified in these settings through songwriting. So, it's almost an instrumentalization of the songwriting to become a health promotion. To become a health promotion device, and we are increasingly seeing that, particularly in the work of the University of Florida Center of Arts and Medicine, where they had where they used the visual arts and songwriting to raise awareness for the COVID vaccine in the US. So as part of the working committee, um, and they found that songwriting helped. So I've used it in that instance. There was another instance where I was invited along with a collaborator, a dance therapist, and together we went into the big anxiety, the festival, as part of the big reach, and that was the theme was suicide prevention and suicide awareness, and so dealing with deep mental health issues, particularly in youths, and then we used songwriting and movement together to generate a dialogue. Sometimes difficult conversations happen through song more easily than they happen through words, and we kind of had that example there. So I've really leaned on songwriting, also because of my cultural identity as a migrant and someone who's new into Australia. I have frequently turned to my own songs for comfort. So I recognize that, with culturally diverse individuals, it's sometimes they need that you know the anchor to hold on to anchor them to their new place, and that anchor very often is in the form of a song that their grandfather sang to them when they were a baby in Vietnam, or a song that their grandmother taught them when they were a child, or a rockabye song in the language, or a lullaby. um, there was a story um, that a woman told me in the perinatal context in Sing to Connect. So she said that she migrated to Australia when she was 12, and so I asked her where she was from, and then she said she was from Syria, and then so we started talking, and I said if she remembered any Arabic or any other dialects from back home, and she said no, but the only thing I do remember is a song. And so she sang the song in all of its entirety. It was so beautiful, with all those inflections and melodic, the ornaments that are very Middle Eastern. It sounded beautiful. And she shared it with the group. Um, and we asked her the meaning of it. And she said, I know the meaning of a few words, but I don't know the meaning of the entire song. However, I can just sing it, and I feel very close to my family when I sing it. I feel very close to a sense of who I could have been or might have been had I been raised in Syria. And I would never know that. But when I do sing this song, I somehow go a little closer to that romantic feeling. And that for her was the closest she got to belonging and, feeling close to her cultural heritage, because she was separated from her parents and all of that. And there's a big story. And then she came into Australia and she was, and yeah. So things like that come out through song, and songwriting brings those words and melodies together. So what was also interesting is that during the group work, she brought out some of those ornamented little melodic lines, and we found that the song became much richer with a very Middle Eastern flavor in certain parts, because she had brought that in through just being there, through just being present, and through being sharing and available and able to contribute. So inherently, songwriting is participative, which is why people love it. Um, and group work is possible. And when I'm talking about songwriting, I'm talking essentially about community songwriting in clinical and non-clinical settings, just to be very clear. This is not artistic songwriting where a songwriter writes a song and there's a record, and that's great. I've done that as well. But, this is a particular context where we are having a greater aim of making people express themselves, helping them to feel better, rather just finding their own themes and rhythm while doing so. So it's inherently participative, and group work is possible. So as researchers, sometimes we do grapple with the challenges of our participants. Some of them are more forthcoming, and some of them might be a little reserved. They might require a companion to maybe engage them in a bit of a conversation, and therefore they start talking. So it's people are very different, particularly in research groups. And if you were to sit down with even a semi-structured interview with them, some interviews may be less successful than others. So sometimes engaging in an arts-based activity like songwriting, even when your questions are necessarily not artistically driven, is useful for qualitative research methodology, because that sometimes offsets some of the power imbalance that happens as well in interviews or more traditional ways of data gathering. So songwriting gives a gentle way for people to open up in their own pace, um, to step back and to listen as well. Sometimes participants need that space to just step back and allow things to percolate, um, before they open up an offer as well. So they must be invited to a space where that space can be held and offered to them. So songwriting gives that space. And they get to work with others. So there's a spirit of collaboration, which is inherently, good for social bonding. And we know that some really good chemicals in the brain are released because people are with each other while writing songs. So um, and that also relates to generative creativity. So, like a person in the group says something and someone else responds to that, and therefore a thread of communication ensues that's quite that people may not have expected. So sometimes unexpected prompts and outcomes can happen in songwriting, which is almost serendipitous in ways, and also it's cognitively very engaging on several levels. And some of those levels I already pointed out here, which is the melodic level, there's a textual level in the story, and the embodied level, and the emotive level. So it's cognitively engaging while also being emotionally charging. And there are few activities in the world that can actually claim this space of being able to do both of these things, stepping out of the brain and being in your body, but also being able to think and come up with phrases, come up with, very often in songwriting we've got a line, something like, I'm going to the beach and I'm feeling happy, ta da 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 da, ta da 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 da. And then there is that meter that runs. And then when the second line is being written, someone might say something, and the other person might be like, but we need to end with something like tada. So what's the word for tada? And then there are people brainstorming tada, happy, uh, dainty, uh, playful, or syllables like that. So it becomes really, really interesting the way in which that engagement, verbally, metrically, musically, happens all together. So it's coalesces into this whole, and one can see the benefit for culturally and linguistically diverse people because they can bring their own languages. In many of the songs that we wrote and Sing to Connect with the Mothers, there were phrases in Kirundi, which is and some in Swahili, and then we had phrases in from Myanmar. So we Chinzomi is the language, and there was some Tamil because I decided to bring my language in, as a facilitator. So we had some fun doing all of that, but the English kind of drove that the narrative as well. And many of the women were learning English in TAFE, and they were having English classes. So they used the songwriting in two ways: to have their own language heard and to learn English. So they would sometimes come off and say, "Today I learned 5 words that I didn't know before," because someone may have mentioned this, and that. Um, and in that way, it's inclusive and also motivating because there's a learning that happens. You know, you learn from each other, you're learning as you go along, you learn a song, and as the song is being formed, everyone's trying to sing it together, people make mistakes, you get help from someone else, and there's that feeling of being helped, gently pushed along. It's all really positive emotions. When you look at the PERMA, when you turn to the PERMA, it ticks all the boxes and more. um, and what you do receive is also a tangible artifact. When you go home, you can say, "Mom or Dad or hubby or partner or whatever, child, hey, I wrote this song. I actually helped make this." And you can record it, you can send it to your family, keep it, and it can respond to need, affect, senses, prompts. And facilitation is also possible. So, this gentle way of really leading people from place A to B without being very incursive or being impeding to people's own ways of existence. So, it's a nice way to hold space. So, um, and that turns me to this space we occupy as researchers and challenging ourselves as researchers. Some of the problems that we do encounter on a daily basis when we are doing field work is, the participant researcher space and the power dynamic that sometimes we do negotiate. We all want for the participants to be heard. We want them to have the central role, but um, very often it does become challenging when we show up with a survey and ethics papers, and we show up with questions, and we're sitting there, and you know even though we are open, we have biscuits on the table, we've got tea, we've got everything. We try. um, but things like songwriting can sometimes, like I said, just ease up that space, and singing can help too. And embedding a songwriting in a research design is possible from the word go. I mean, and this would be, I think, even research that does not involve music, that does not involve singing. Songwriting has been used very successfully um, as a way to do arts-based research, particularly with younger people. There is a wonderful project going on here in Queensland where younger people, youth 18 to 25, fighting cancer at the moment, are invited to come in with their guitars and drumsticks and actually write songs and just make a mess and have fun for on a week morning with experienced songwriters. So they're in a space where they can actually just like unplug, be young people, have fun, and then go back to their life challenge. So there is an opportunity to really co-design that work and weave that in with social justice, social change, medical humanities, and more broadly, perspectives. um, it also offers a way to leverage everyday creativities because not everybody has ever sung, but they all have a song um, and you can hold space for that. And it's not only data but also art. I mean, when I wrote this, I got thinking about what art means and what data means, and how these two sometimes sit side by side for us, folk who do arts based research, in using music and art and psychology, and try to make sense of it, particularly in a qualitative context. um, so at this point, I just yeah, I've said a lot. I've shared a lot. I'm grateful for this space. Thank you. But just a moment to reflect, perhaps, on, as a group, um, on some of the arts-based methods that we have used in our work as a group that you have used. So maybe you can pop that in the chat. And I do have a 5-minute songwriting exercise before I wind up for the questions. So it's like a small activity. Once you finish popping that your research in the chat, if and when you have used songwriting, uh, I invite you to just take this activity. So this activity is you kind of thinking about your favorite place. It could be a space, it could be a site, it could be a metaphorical place, it could be a conceptual space. I am at dash. So maybe fill that in. And over there, what are you doing? I am dash. So that's a verb that ends with ing. Or it can be a feeling that can be calm. I am calm. I am sleepy. I am tired. So songwriting does not have to always be gung ho and positive. In fact, in many cases, it's not. People communicate some of their darkest emotions through songs. So I am tired, I am sick, I am unwell is fine. I am fine. I am singing, I'm dancing. All that's okay. So once you write this in a piece of paper near you, probably I would probably like a couple of you to volunteer to say it, to speak these lines. I am dash. I am at dash space. You fill it. I am splash. So I would invite you, volunteers, like maybe one or two people, to speak that, to intone it. Okay. And then we can see if we can together make something happen. So, do we have volunteers for this little task?
Feel free to unmute or
Yeah.
put what you've written in the chat, or I mean, we're a small enough group, so we can do this fairly freely, I think.
So why don't I start and give an example? I am at the beach. I am, what can I say? Playing. Okay. So then, if I have to say it as I would, um, to a friend, so I say, I'm at the beach and I'm playing. 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 So there is a melody contour that's appearing as I'm speaking,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is somewhat the beginning of a song, and that's why, who else wants to volunteer?
I wrote something that the first thing that popped into my head, Charu. So I
Yeah,
said, I am at peace, Peace.
yeah,
I am piecing together, Piecing.
that's lovely.
Yeah.
That is lovely. How would you say it, Melissa? If you saw me and then you're like,
Mm,
you know what, Charu, I'm at peace
mm.
and I'm piecing together. How would you say it?
If I was saying it just to you in conversation, I'd say, I'm at peace. I'm piecing together.
I'm at
Um,
peace.
mm,
Say, when you say it, it's different. See, when I'm saying it is
mm,
not. Say it.
I'm at peace. I'm piecing together. I'm at peace. I'm
S-
piecing together.
So there are
Mm.
there are tones that there are musical notes that actually appear out of
Mm.
nowhere.
That's right, because there's musical tones in our speech.
Speech.
Yeah.
And speech is such an important characteristic of a culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why linguistically we have accents. Like no two people speak the same way. And sometimes we can guess, are you from East Asia? Are you from Russia? Or are you from America? Or are you Irish or are you Scottish? You have
Mm.
that kind of a, oh, I sense a hint of an accent, we say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're trying to get. So the way I said it and the way Melissa said it, if we could have a guitar on the premises and someone is
Mm.
capturing those notes, the facilitation is so important in songwriting. It's so important. Um, and the artists are so important there. That's why they're so important. Or you could have something as simple as a ukulele, you know
Mm.
somebody's with that, and just tracing those, and voila, you have what's appearing to be a song. So people frequently say, look, I can write words, but I can't write a song because I don't write music. And that's when the speech becomes a good friend.
Actually,
Yes.
that was something that I was going to ask you. Do you mind if I jump into a question, Charu?
Yes, please jump into
Is
questions
that
so we
right?
finish this activity. But maybe do this with a friend or something and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for this opportunity. So please jump into questions. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Charu. Yeah, just following on from what you were saying there, the facilitation is so important. And I was thinking about what you mentioned around the power dynamic, when you're a traditional researcher and you're going in and you're kind of collecting data or whatever. And there is, I guess, still a power dynamic at play when you have people who have extensive musical expertise going into communities and working with people who have, no formal
Yeah.
training or whatever. So what sort of strategies do you use to even that out, if you like? Because even if the facilitator doesn't necessarily come across as somebody who is
Mm,
um, kind of parading their expertise,
mm,
sometimes community members might feel reticent to participate because
yeah.
they don't come from that background. So what do you do? Do you have any kind of specific strategies to kind of even things out or deal with people who are a little bit reluctant to participate?
Yeah. Um, Look, yeah, it's always hard. I usually go with a team of facilitators, and what happens is, um, I mean, I try not to bring sheet music into the space,
Mm.
so that's one thing that I try and avoid. Um, there is the whiteboard that we use, and we also I render myself really vulnerable because when I forget the words or when I forget the melody, I'm just there as a person and I've forgotten something. And no, like I just am one of them in that moment, at that moment, then that gives me you know a belonging
Mm.
with that community, because
Mm.
yeah, I don't have sheet, I may not remember the words, and a very high sense of ownership and agency can be given to your participants when they are teaching you a language.
Mm.
So what happens is, even when we're having the chords and the music ready, if we don't know what to say, then we're not singing. We
Mm.
can't. So we turn to them and say, could you please actually say that so we can repeat it? So we turn around the teacher student relationship, and actually they are teaching us the word. Uh, so, for instance, the word for placenta in Kirundi is ingobji, And when we were asking that around, they said Ingobji, but it's really hard to pronounce it. Even now, I'm not pronouncing it 100%. Ingobji, there's a Y there, and it's difficult. So
Mm,
when oh placenta Ingobji, and we were trying to sing that, it's easy enough. We all got the melody. They also got the melody, some better than even I did. But I didn't we couldn't get the words. So we turned to those women and said, "Can you please sing that?" So they were teaching us that.
mm.
When they were teaching us that, then oh, that was completely. And we used to sometimes give them the whiteboard marker. They would come and take the whiteboard marker and write, and we would say, how would you spell it, because you just want to write it. How would you write it in English, so we know, and to share. And then they
Mm,
write that. They would tell us how to pronounce it, and they would correct us, because inevitably we would mess it up. And so there's lovely. It's actually lovely to make mistakes and to be really natural,
mhm.
as you would with. It's almost like just being in family, because no one likes a know-all, right? Even at the family dinner table, if you're going to be telling all the jokes, you're not going to be the most popular person there. So it's okay to spill the gravy. Actually, if you really spilled the gravy, it's okay to own it.
Yeah,
And
that,
it somehow humanizes.
that's great. I
Yeah.
love that. I just want to read out some of the things that people put in the chat when you asked what methods people have used. So I haven't actually used songwriting myself, but I have used vocal improvisation, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And people are surprisingly willing to give that a go.
Mm.
Even people who, like, the people I work with have Parkinson's, and they are always willing to give vocal improvisation a go, and it always ends up with a laugh. Um,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
Trisna says that she's done a PAR project, participatory action research, I'm thinking that stands for, improvising music and dance remotely.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that would be interesting to hear Trisna about.
Yes. Yeah.
And Amanda's worked with a music therapist who did songwriting, but she didn't do it herself. And Tasha writes, my current PhD research incorporates songwriting to bridge the inner and outer sights. Interesting. Um,
We spoke about sites and place and
mm,
space, so that's
mm.
very interesting.
So
Yeah.
please feel free to unmute and ask Charu questions or make comments. I've got one other thing I wanted to talk about, Charu, and that
Mm.
is this the fact that a songwriting activity gives you this artifact.
Mm.
Now, to me, I think that is just so valuable because, when we sing or make music together, it's a transitory thing in a way because it's over once it's over. You do take memories and you take those feelings with you, but to have that kind of artifact, to me, would be, I can imagine for the participants, a huge sense of accomplishment, which then feeds into, like you were saying, perma and, a sense of accomplishment. And yeah, I'm just wanting you to just tease out a little bit more about the importance of the artifact itself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the artifact, I mean, I'll give you a story. I mean, not a story, but a real example. Um, with patients living who are terminally ill, who are in the end of life stages, um, I learned that the Center for Arts and Medicine in Florida, in the Uni of Florida, they have a team of people who sit down with the family, who sit down with this person and write a song for them. And that's a
Mm,
memory song. That's a
mm,
memorializing this person's life. So the person gets to contribute, their family gets to say things or share that, and they sing it together. And they record it. They record it, and it's almost no, it's a beautiful farewell, and people who first hand worked in that space have really felt moved.
mm,
So that's an example. The other example of that takeaway value is what I heard in the Connecting the Dots. It's an organization in South Australia, and they have a lullaby project. So these are mothers who have sometimes bid farewell to their babies. These mothers and fathers who have
mhm,
had to
mhm,
because of medical issues. And that song stays with them even after the child leaves
mm,
them.
mm,
And that was written for. So one of these songs were actually performed at the Carnegie Hall.
Wow.
as part of their lullaby project. It was selected from this project and performed at Carnegie Hall.
Mm,
So that's the kind of takeaway impact. It lives
mm.
on.
Yeah,
It gives
absolutely.
life to people, to their feelings, to their memory.
And obviously then it's something that can literally be passed on to, it can
It
live
has,
through a
yeah.
family, and yeah,
Yes,
it's just
yes,
so
absolutely.
powerful in that respect.
Yes.
Trishna, yes, love to hear from you.
Thank you. Hi, Charu.
Hello, Trishna, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Um, just with regards to facilitation, you were talking a bit about sort of managing the power dynamics. I was curious how much you go into a session with a framework, about group processes, or how much you're just responding intuitively.
Yeah. Personally, I'm a very intuitive kind of person. I'm an
Mm,
improviser. I come from a tradition of improvisation in Indian music. So I respond to cues that are verbal, non-verbal, people yawning or just turning their heads or moving away shows me they're bored. So I would be picking up a lot on that. However, it always helps to go with a plan, because especially to start the process, people like to have a plan, and then they feel like there is a guiding hand. There's something that there's a result, there's a process and the result, and we're going to achieve this. So there's that positive trajectory that people actually want to see, I think. And it's more a psychological tool rather than a planning tool, I would say. So when I would go in there, I'd go with a plan and say, so today the plan is to do this, and we will end up having a song with us, or we'll end up having a few ideas to write songs tomorrow. So today we're going to do this by lunchtime, and then we're going to have lunch, and then maybe in the afternoon we're going to make a song. So I'd have something to give the people to excite them. So it's more like a plan for the day, a plan to be on our feet and do stuff.
mhm, mhm.
And I guess that having the plan makes the participants feel confident and safe as well, doesn't it? Rather than just
It
going in there and
does.
saying we're just going to make it up, as we go
Yeah,
along.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like many of the participants, when it's a really planned program, when health services are involved and when you have community services, multiple stakeholders are there in the room, as researchers, it's really good to look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way. So it really helps,
Yeah.
because there is also the credibility that we bring.
Hmm.
And we are we can improvise, of course we can improvise, and we've been, for those who of us who've been doing this for a long time, we'd probably know it's like an intuitive thing, but it always helps, and the participants will have more trust if, I think, someone goes with a plan.
Mm,
The
mm,
trust, the initial trust also, I have seen in a few instances, is related to, in fact, some people even like a sheet to know, okay, because there are people who really are planners by personality. And it's like, okay, what's the itinerary for today? What am I going to do?
mm, mm.
Let's go to Ibiza for 2 days and then we'll see what we do. No, actually, what am I going to do in Ibiza? I'd like to know. I want to know.
Yeah.
Do I get a say in that? Can I do this before that?
Mm,
Or, yeah,
mm, mm. I think the point you make about, say a community artist or facilitator going into a context where there are people from the allied health professions, just even having that kind of demeanor of professionalism because of
exactly.
the stereotypical artist is kind of a bit loose and all the rest of it.
Yes,
It
yes.
helps to kind of counteract those types of
Yes.
stereotypes, I suppose, as well.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
yeah,
Or the artist will emerge, but
yeah,
we
yeah.
we will, it's all smoke and mirrors in the beginning.
That's right. That's great.
Yeah.
Has anyone else got any comments they'd like to make? Charu, I have to say, I've found this so inspiring, and my mind is kind of going at 100 miles an hour because there are so many things that you've mentioned today, which are kind of were in my mind disparate things that I'm interested in, like, you know, the idea of narrative and narrative inquiry, and how you can link that to songwriting, for example.
Yes.
Yeah, and the interdisciplinary nature of what this work is just really got my mind buzzing. So I'm very
Yeah.
grateful for that.
It's something to think about, and maybe even
Mm,
write together about, Melissa, and we could definitely have a chat.
yeah,
But I just want to say I have a few colleagues from Utah who have actually joined in and who are here. So hello, I'm safe and well and back in Queensland. So I
yes,
was just
thank
sitting
you for
with
joining us.
I was just
And
sitting with some of them. Yeah.
oh, good. And for those people who are on the call who aren't familiar with our society, the Australian Music and Psychology Society, it is free to join. So we always like to give a little plug to join the society. It's very active and it's a really lovely society. And we welcome you members at any time. So please just jump onto our website, and I'll put this into the chat, and join up there if you are interested in more information about the society. Look, Charu, I think with that we'll call it a day. You've had a very long day and a big big week so far, so very much appreciate you fitting this into your extremely busy schedule. And yeah, I'm sure everybody else on the call joins me in saying this is a very inspiring and fascinating session today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Amanda, for inviting me to this one. I've been a big fan of the AMPS for a long time, as you know. So it's absolutely, it's a privilege to be invited to speak in the seminar series. Yeah.
Wonderful. And we'll have the recording available soon for everybody who wasn't able to make it today as well too, Charu. So feel free to share that with interested people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone for coming. Have a wonderful evening.
Have a wonderful evening.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Melissa.
Oh, thanks. That was great. I really loved it.
Thank you so much.
It was fantastic. Really lovely to hear you talk about it. I want to hear more about the songwriting with lullabies and mothers and babies for a project we're starting here. So
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely, Amanda. We should chat. Love to. Yeah.
Well, once you find your way in Tasmania, we'll give you a little bit of time to recover.
Yeah. Actually, I'm working remotely until February because I've got my year 12 twins are moving to uni in February, so I would need to settle them and then I would have to move. So yeah.
That's good that they've accommodated that.
Yeah.
Bad time to be moving, right?
Yeah. And I can't move with year 12 commitments. So
yeah,
that gives me some
well,
time to finish up
good.
the house and all that. So
Yeah.
happy to chat.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, folks.
Thanks so much, Charu.
Have a good
good
one.
night.
Thanks.
See ya.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.